Hello.
Welcome to another episode of This Uncanny Earth. Tonight we'll be talking about free speech, so I hope you guys are ready for that. So, Steven, go ahead and kick us off.
All right. So to start off, free speech. I found uscourts.gov says, "What does free speech mean?" And this is a .gov website, so I'm hoping, I would assume they know what they're talking about. And it says freedom of speech includes the right not to speak, specifically the right not to salute the flag, the right of students to wear black armbands to school to protest a war, students to do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate, to use certain offensive words and phrases to convey political messages. I think YouTube could use a little bit of work on that one themselves. To contribute money to political campaigns, to advertise commercial products and professional services, and to engage in symbolic speech, such as burning the flag in protest. Now let's talk about that. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that all sounds acceptable? In your
Oh, go
personal
ahead, man.
opinions?
No, go ahead. I did. I was looking at something real quick.
Um, to be fair, before we get into the intricacies of the whole thing, um, free speech as a concept, as it applies to government, deals specifically with how the government is able to respond to things. When you talk about corporations, especially private corporations,
They have their own
corporations
rules.
that are private can basically say or do whatever they want, because when you use their product or you use their services, you are agreeing to play by their rules. So if you're going to be
Well,
on social media and it's a private company, then they can say, you can't say this, you can't say this, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this. Part of the issue there is that most social media companies now have gone public. They have stock options, they have shareholders. And so they play a little fast and loose with the definition of what's allowed and what isn't, because they have to please their shareholders and the people who own the company publicly rather than just a board of directors who says, no, we don't want to do that. So when somebody goes on to Facebook and uses a horrible slur of some kind, and then Facebook says, whoop, that's no good, and takes their post down, is Facebook limiting their free speech? Sure, to an extent. Should they be allowed to say it? On the one hand, sure. Should they be shielded from if somebody comes up and beats the snot out of them for saying it?
nope. Not
No,
at
not
all.
really, because you went into it knowing the consequences of what you were going to say. Um, I'm pretty firm on saying pretty much whatever I want, wherever I want, to whoever I want, and I frequently do that. And people do tend to have problems with that. They can either tell me about it or they don't. It doesn't matter. And if they tell me about it and I can see their point of view, then maybe I'll say, okay, well, you know what? I was out of line. Okay, I'll take that back. Most of the time, people just like to complain and just yell at me, like, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 and just get flame war over it. But that's the internet these days, so I don't really worry about it much. But the bottom line to that is, if I say something, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, or whatever, the First Amendment, which is mostly, I'm guessing, what we're talking about at issue here, says that people in the federal government can't come down and say, you got to take that down. You're not allowed to say that. They can't do that because I'm guaranteed free speech as far as government is concerned. But again, if I say something stupid to somebody and they're like, you know what? I don't like what you said, I can be like, okay, or I don't
Okay.
care. And they can be like, all right, and pop me in the mouth. So if I say something, I better be prepared for if that person wants to pop me in the mouth.
Um, Free speech is a tricky thing, to be quite fair. How far does free speach
Yeah.
constitute?
I feel that.
Obviously, a company is allowed to make its own rules and regulations regarding that, and companies will operate in their own best interests. 9 times out of 10, unless you are some extremist group website, you're probably going to get your stuff pulled, banned, things of that nature. Do I agree with it? I don't know. Because the company has within its rights to maintain its product integrity. Um, and if it doesn't maintain its product
Hey,
integrity, then what does
James.
it have? It doesn't have a product. On the other hand, it still has to send a message that this kind of behavior or attitude isn't acceptable. And if it doesn't do that, then it'll be perceived as weak, especially, if it's something blatantly like a racial slur or um, something of that nature. So I do believe that
Yeah.
corporations have the right to police their own free speech. But in terms of going outside and saying it, you can say whatever you want. You're free from um, the government coming down and saying you can't say that. You're not free from the consequences of your actions.
Yeah. Like Spider was talking about. Someone could come up and
Basically,
hit
yeah.
you if they wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other side of the coin with free speech. Yeah, you can say whatever you want. Within
Yeah.
reason, you can't go into a crowded movie theater and yell fire, but that's a whole different that's a
Yeah.
whole no, that's a whole different law that it's
Oh,
a
really?
call to action type of thing. Yeah.
Instigating
Oh,
is a big difference, because if you're trying to, because that falls under terrorism basically. If you're doing something to try to get people to do violent things, that's not just you exercising free speech. That's you calling for people to do violent things or to act on certain things of speech. That's a whole different thing. And there's still going to be people that say, "Oh no, I was allowed to say that," and blah blah blah. But if 2,000 people listen to you and then go on a rampage downtown and break a bunch of stuff, who's at fault for that? Partially them, but you're the one who riled them up. And if you riled them up on purpose, that's
so
terrorism.
what if you riled them up with non-violent intentions?
It doesn't matter. Nonviolent can be just as annoying as violent intentions. You push somebody far
Uh,
enough and then they react and then you get what you were looking for.
yeah.
That's
Simple as that, really.
that's kind of a central part, and I'm not going to dig too deeply into it because a lot of people have a lot of opinions about it, but it's kind of a central part about
Yeah.
the whole January 6th thing from, what was it, 2 years? No, not more than 2 years ago. It was few years ago,
4. It's 4
4 years
years
ago.
ago.
Um,
Yeah.
is that the issue is, did Trump at the time specifically say things that riled the people up to go in and start smashing stuff? Or was he just talking and the people took it the wrong
Yeah.
way? Now, I'm not making a
That's kind of the
determination
gray
either way. I'm
area.
just presenting both sides of that, because I know instantly somebody
Yeah.
out there listening to this is going to be like, "What do you mean didn't rile him up? Of course he did, and this, that." And I'm not arguing that with anybody. That's a whole other whatever.
Yeah.
I'm
We're
just
not getting
laying
into
out
that.
the hypothetical back and forth. So I don't want to make people think I'm
Yeah.
endorsing or not endorsing different things.
That's
But
that's a whole other can of worms.
that's how that works. In that, if somebody's kind of ambiguous about it or a little bit like you don't really know, you then have to follow along and see, well, did they really instigate something or didn't they? And if you can
Yeah.
honestly be like, yeah, these people did what they did because this person basically told them to do it, then that person's definitely at fault, and it's not, again, exercising their right to speak.
Yeah. So I'm a little conflicted about it myself because, like, I agree you shouldn't be able to just, threaten people on the one hand, but on the other hand, you should be able to talk about certain words. I mean, even in my personal opinion, I feel like you should be able to talk about certain words even in private businesses. They should be allowed because the federal law should supersede the law of, private businesses. Because, like, I'm trying to avoid the words because of where we're streaming to, but you know what I'm getting at. Like, there are certain words that we can't say on YouTube or we'll get striked. And it's like, we're not trying to instigate anything. We're just trying to tell people the story of what's happening and the facts, but it's gets complicated when we can't use certain words. So that's kind of like a gray area, I feel like.
Yeah, but that's going to happen on platforms where you have social media presence. There's just certain words
Yeah.
you can't get away with saying because what if your intentions are serious? And they got to take those kind of things
Yeah.
serious. Now, certain other things like dealing
And just like you're
with the
talking about,
pandemic and
oh, go
such,
ahead.
That was something else. That was things getting covered up and things that got swept under the rug in the name of big science, and nobody cared. Everybody was for it because it was a panic. It was panic mode. And there's some things that are like that on YouTube. They don't want you to talk about it because they made a mistake and they don't want people to know about it. And that's on all,
Yeah.
a lot of social media platforms. We got we
And
got a
that's the
strike
part
for
I have a
that.
problem.
So, but
Yeah.
once again, does the company make the rules or does the shareholders make the rules?
The
Who makes the
shareholders.
rules? 9 times out of 10, sure. But it's not the customers that make the rules.
No, never.
I've seen people boycott stuff. This store said A or this store said B, and people say, I'm going to boycott it. And it doesn't really work on larger corporations just because for every person that doesn't go in there, they'll get 2 or 3 more to take their place. It works on a mom and pop store or a small chain, but in terms of a nationwide chain like Home Depot or Lowe's, yeah, good luck. People still need to
Walmart,
fix their
Kroger.
home. People still need to get food.
People
People
still
still
need
need
groceries.
to do things. So, you can't curtail everybody. You might get a couple diehards, but they don't need to fix their house. Simple as that.
Whomever is paying the bills sets the rules. That's right,
Along with
James.
that, James, acceptable speech is a fluid concept depending on what the majority thinks is acceptable. That's the other part of it. It's all based on whatever direction society is at any given time. You're seeing kind of a difference in that right now, in that for the last 4 years or so, and dealing with like the virus stuff and all that other kind of thing, you saw
Oh, you said
a
the V
lot of
word.
things that were not acceptable. Yeah, but just that, because there's a lot of different things. You got West
Yeah.
Nile, you've got bird flu, whatever. It's all right. But you saw a lot of things that were the majority said, no, you can't say that. No, you can't talk about that. No, that's not right. Now things have kind of flip flopped. You have a lot of programs that were for a different outlook that are going away. A lot of corporations are switching their stances on that and reversing on that. And so we're kind of in between because it's like I said, the majority sets what direction free speech is going to go. If the larger group says, no, that's not acceptable, then it's not acceptable, whether you like it or not, unfortunately, even if it's something that's not that bad. And on the other token, if the majority says, well, now everything's good, you can talk about whatever you want. And that's how it goes, because it's all fluid based on society. It's not based necessarily on social morals and ethics specifically. It's based on whatever direction the society is going at the time.
Popular vote.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
People get with the latest trends, so they get with the latest versions of speech, or they get rid of speech. There's been a lot of movies that had certain speech that they banned. They said this is not acceptable in this day and age. Um, Books, for instance, some of those got banned. And that's how society deals with their free speech problem. But 9 times out of 10, if they're banning books, it's not a good thing. It doesn't lead to
Ever.
great things. And the thing is, I think, if you're a free speech person, then you're going to say, is hate speech free speech? I think it is. I think it's free speech until you actually show an
Yeah.
inclination of doing something or riling people up to go do something. it's free speech, in my personal opinion.
And like,
Because again,
I
if you go
personally,
out and say something, then somebody can easily just be like, "Well, you said that, and that was really rude, and I'm gonna pop you for it."
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's once again, you've got
Mhm.
free speech. You don't have freedom from consequences, good or bad. Good
Yep.
or bad.
exactly. Yeah. Now, it does go on in this government website over here. It does also say freedom of speech does not include certain rights, like like you and Spider were talking about a minute ago, such as to incite imminent lawless action, to make or distribute obscene materials, to burn draft cards as an anti-war protest, to permit students to print articles in a school newspaper over the objections of the school administration, of students to make an obscene speech as an excuse at a school-sponsored event. So free speech would not allow you to go to a school-sponsored event and make a speech about, things that we're not going to talk about here, or try to encourage the children to do things that they shouldn't be doing.
Once again, it's the
So
encouragement
there are
aspect
certain
that you're talking
limitations.
about. And plus, yeah, like there's
Yes.
certain things you have to curtail. You can't just have somebody go make a speech at a children's school and it's nothing but,
Yeah.
obscene gestures and coarse language and things like that. So yeah, you have to. There's
Yeah.
rules. You once again though, here's the thing that we're missing. You can do those things, right? You're allowed to do those things. However, there's consequences for doing those things, right? Um, but the government can't just come put you in jail for saying it unless it's something once again where you're making an active threat
Not
or
in
you're
America.
yeah like but they can't call but they can do the business can do is say hey we want you to leave now you're
Yeah.
trespassing if you do not
Mhm.
leave so now they are allowed to enact law enforcement to come and pick you up because they've asked you to leave and you're not and that's trespassing on property. You know what I mean? So that's where they curtail that. You could say it. You can go on stage
Yeah.
at a children's school and say whatever you want to say. It doesn't mean that something like somebody come up and might punch you in your mouth. And that's it. But they're not. It's not something they can throw you in. You know, prison for. The lewd
Yeah.
actions, yes, but the speech itself, they're usually not going to do that.
To
And
contrast that,
oh, go ahead.
when people say, "Oh, you're not allowed to say things in America. We're losing our free speech." If you take a look at some place like the UK, which is the closest to us in as far as potential open-mindedness, whatever, in the UK, if you make a social media post that is a denial of certain, let's say, certain gender ideas, right? I'm not going to get into that, and I'm not going to say whether it's good or bad or anything. It's just an example. They have laws over there now where if you say this isn't true, this other thing is true, they can go to your house and they can arrest you. You're
I
probably
saw
not going to
those
sit in jail
videos.
for very long. You're probably going to get a fine, but they can still do that. The government can be like, nah, you shouldn't have said that. And that's it. And that's a total difference.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets worse in some other countries, especially in the Middle
China.
East, where if you say things like in China, if you say things that they don't like, they might put you
Winnie the
away for
Pooh.
a long time. They will
Yeah.
put you away for one thing, or they might take your tongue out.
Hmm.
They don't play over there. So anytime somebody says here you're not allowed to say things, maybe to a limited extent, but you're getting it off pretty easy being here compared to some of those other places.
And sometimes the most you're going to get is just a punch in the face. In those
Yeah.
countries, you'll get jail time, you'll get freedom stripped, you might get killed.
Executed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Especially if you're an American in these places. That's another thing we have to understand is if you're an American in those places, you already got a strike against you. They already don't like you based off of what the media thinks. And if you're not, people need to stay out of two things when they go to other countries: talks about politics and political marches. Because anytime you join in that, you're asking for bad trouble. Because if the police
Yeah.
come in, who do you think they're going to side with?
And your rights, your American rights, do not count in other
And
countries.
that's yeah.
That's the other thing to remember, because a lot of people go over there. Oh no, they're over overruling my rights. I have rights. Sure, back home in Russia, no, you don't got any rights. In China, no, you don't got any rights. In Japan, no, you don't got any rights. You have to follow the rules that they have. South Korea, with that dude that's up there who's in prison right now for running around messing with people on the street, thought, oh,
Oh,
yeah, I got
I
rights.
like
They won't
that
come after
though.
me. And he's still in jail.
Oh, I thought
You
that was
know, he's
hilarious, to be honest.
he's finding out. I've talked about it on the show here
Yep,
before. He
mess
messed
around,
around
find
and he
out.
found out it's not the same other
Yep.
places. It doesn't matter how nice the country seems. It doesn't matter how nice the people are. If you think that you're going to get away with the same stuff you do here someplace else, you're going to find yourself in a jail cell at the best.
Johnny Somali, that was his name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at the kid that was breaking into cars years ago in Singapore.
Yeah.
You know, not free speech, obviously, but he still did something he shouldn't have, and they caned him.
Yeah.
America tried to step in and say, hey, please don't do that. And they said, we won't cane him as much. We're still going to cane him, but we won't cane him as much.
And like Spider was talking about a minute ago about your American rights not carrying over to other countries. In Japan, in particular, I've heard. I mean, I've never been over there, so I don't know. But from what I've been told, Japanese citizens have more rights in Japan than you do as a tourist, like
Yes.
as an American tourist.
Yes.
Mm.
And, you
And
know, my whole thing is, okay, that's their country, man. Like you got to
yeah,
operate within the rules of their. You're not.
Mm-hmm.
America isn't everywhere, man. If you don't like the way they treat people, don't go.
yeah,
It's not hard. Don't go.
It's like there was something that happened in Italy a few years ago. There were a couple of American, what were they, college students or something, and they did something. I feel like they were messing with a girl or something, and they tried to claim like immunity or something because they were American, and the Italian government was like, no,
no.
absolutely not. And it got to be a pretty big news story, and I can't for the life of me remember most of it because news cycle something's huge and then it's
Yeah.
not. But they got they had to get taken out of the country. Like they threw them out. I think they spent some time in jail over there before they tossed them out. I think they had to pay a fine. Um, the basketball player lady who took
Oh, in Russia. Yeah.
took the oil into Russia, thinking, oh yeah, I'll use this weed oil to chill out while I'm over here. Not in Russia, you don't. I mean, yeah, sure. To you, it might be just, oh, it's just a little weed oil. What's the big deal? To Russia,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's bad, and they're putting
Yeah.
you in jail. I mean, you can't
Yep.
just go places and assume that you can do what you want because you're American and you can do what you want here because you cannot.
Especially like a big thing that I don't think a lot of people would even think about would be something like food or nose spray. Even something as simple as nose spray medication might be illegal in another country when it's legal here.
Well, like Sudafed stuff's illegal in Japan.
Yeah, that's exactly
there's
what I was
certain
getting at.
medications that you can't take, and if you need them, there's not really anything you can do about it.
Yeah, you're just
other
whatever.
than try to sneak it over, don't get caught.
No, don't mess around with Japan. They have a 99% conviction rate. I wouldn't do it.
You can always hide things if you understand how the TSA stuff works. I'm not saying do that, but
Yeah,
it's just something to think about.
it's a thing.
But those are other countries, and it's not like and yeah, Americans do have it good. We're allowed to go on. We can go on a tirade about the president or the last president, and nobody's going to come get us in the middle of the night. We got a guy in Iran that they have been going and picking them up in the middle of the night, taking whole families and journalists getting kidnapped and never seen again because they said something against the government. We're lucky. We don't, the worst you're going to get here is quote unquote canceled. And, that's not even really a thing as long as you have enough people that back you. But they're not going to come and get you in the middle of the night and say, hey, your family's come with us. This isn't Syria with all the horrible prisons that they let people out of. This is the United States. And we have it fantastic. We can go on Facebook right now and just go on rants all night. We can talk about every political person we ever want to, and they're not going to do anything. We might get, banned from the channel, but we're not going to be arrested. We're not going to be thrown in jail. We're not going to become political dissidents. So we have to think about those things. And that's why I tell people, if you're going to go to another country, it's like going into somebody else's house. Take your shoes off and abide by their rules or leave. There's no, and it's not like once you get there, you have to stay there. You can leave. You can turn around and go right back home. You might have to live at the airport for a couple of days. But if you're not going to abide by their rules, then why are you going to go over there and cause trouble and expect us to come and get you? I don't believe in going to get our Americans if you're going to act like a jackwagon. If you're going to act like a spoiled American, I don't want you coming back.
James got banned on Facebook, he said.
Everybody's been banned on Facebook.
I have. Not banned, but I've gotten in trouble many times. Hell, I got in trouble earlier tonight on YouTube because I tried to call someone a dumbass. It's like, no. Oh, sorry. That's my one. That's my one for this episode.
You're basically Red Foreman.
Yeah.
People are metaphorically and verbally trigger happy on social media these days too. Like, there are people whose entire existence on social media has nothing to do with interacting with people, but just looking around and seeing other people posting things and be like, oh, I don't like that. Report. I don't like that. Report. I don't like that.
Oh, no.
Report. And just trying to get rid of as much stuff as possible because they don't like it, or because they don't think it should be allowed, or they think that Facebook's not going to do the job, so I got to do it.
I admit, I did that for the spiral comments. The spiral, anti-spiral, ban anti-spiral. I report those every time I see them. Sorry.
On Facebook, I don't mess around too much with that kind of thing unless it's something really vile that somebody's getting away with. If I think people are like, if they're really saying some rude stuff, then I don't mind hitting the report on it. I'm not going to obsess about it, and I'm not going to follow up for weeks on end to see if Facebook did anything about it. I'll probably just end up blocking them from there. They won't know that I blocked them because it's not somebody I usually interact with. The people that I usually interact with don't say things that are particularly horrible that I've noticed. I mean,
reminded me.
Not that I've noticed, but
thank you, Lighthouse Flame and Spider. I was trying to wait until you got done talking, but you reminded me of something absolutely hilarious. Did you guys hear they let Kanye back on Twitter? And did you see what he was talking about? I'm not going to get into it, but it was, yeah.
He says what he says to get people's
Shock
attention
factor.
On him.
Yes,
that's what he does. 100%. That's his thing now. That
and
is
it was
his
hilarious.
Thing now.
It was 100%
and you got to expect
hilarious.
It. You either let him do it, and maybe it'll work for him, maybe it won't, or you draw more attention to it by shutting him up, and then he can just go to someplace else and be like, see, look, they didn't want to talk about things. They wanted to do whatever. They're afraid of what I got to say and things like that, because that's what people do.
Like, chill, chill.
I'm not saying stuff that he says is appropriate or anything like that.
No, not at all.
I don't endorse some of that kind of stuff. I'm just saying that.
But yeah, when you were saying that, like, when people get like extra about it, then you report them. That's what you reminded me of, because he got extra about it. Yeah,
but you just take your little shot and then you move on. You don't gotta obsess about it. You don't gotta worry about trying to ruin somebody's life. Like that. That's the thing that people try to do. They try to ruin. If they see something that they think is a terrible thing, and they say, "Oh, well, social media isn't going to do anything about it," they start trying to find out where the person lives, where the person works. They try to call their job, be like, "Hey,
oh, no, that's too much."
Something happened on something that I was a part of in the past. I don't remember what. Like one of these radio show things. I don't think it was this one. I think it might have been the old crap job back in the day. I think I said something on that show that somebody didn't like.
Ooh.
And what it was when I was dealing with people who lived next door who were using
I think you talked
pharmaceuticals
about this
that they shouldn't have.
Yes. Yeah, you talked about this.
So they followed on my Facebook stuff and found out that I'm on this radio show. And they sent emails and got in the comments trying to get me taken off the show like I was an employee or something, which I wasn't. I was just I was just co-hosting the show, but it was funny at the
Yeah.
time because I'm like, these people are really mad. They're trying to get me booted off of something that I do. But who cares? I mean, at the time we
Yeah.
ignored it. I mean, at the time it was still a united front, and the person I was dealing with wasn't a total turd. But that's a whole
Now
other
you got to deal with me.
series of
So
events. But that's what people will do.
yeah.
People try to do that.
So what do you guys think about freedom of the press? Like compared to normal people, do you think there should be different rules in free speech between individual people and like news media sources?
Just don't lie. Tell
Yeah.
the truth. And if you don't tell the truth, you get sued or you get
Fined or something?
taken. No, you get completely shut down.
Oh, that'd be great.
Make reporting fake news a crime or a fine so large that nobody
Yeah.
does it. You know, news, the press started sinking when they let everybody have an opinion instead of putting out factual evidence. When they started having the roundtable discussions and everybody gets to have an opinion, that's when the free press went out the window. Now it's, if you don't agree with my opinion, you're a bad person. Or if you
Yeah.
don't think this person's bad, then you're a bad person. You know, so for
And
me,
it's all biased.
there's no free press unless you start something from your home. You know, your independent sources are about the closest thing. Your boots
Yeah.
on the ground journalists, they're about the closest thing. But in terms of free press as a whole, we don't have that anymore in the United, at least in the United States, because you know the media, these giant corporations own everything. So you know, it's like, and if you ever seen the video where there's a bunch of people talking about saying the same thing, there's a bunch of newscasters, and they're all saying the same sentence, and they're different news organizations. They're all different, but they're saying the exact same thing. They're reading from the exact same uh, uh, precomposed uh,
Hey, we love you, James.
cue
You're good.
cards, you know. So that's it. Like, and that's radio. Like I said, go on YouTube, go on Reddit. You'll see that there are videos of reporters from different news stations saying verbatim the same sentences because it's all pre-scripted.
Yeah.
They'll give you a little bit of the facts, but 9 times out of 10, it's their opinion. And they twist the facts so much that they can get away with it, but they're lying. Or they're not giving you enough of the facts for you to put your own conclusion together. They want you to
Exactly.
rely on them to give you the conclusion. And
Rather than make your own.
news used to be about, here's the facts, you got to make a decision. Now it's, here's the opinion and we make the decision.
That goes back to what we talked about if you hold a big rally in front of a bunch of people and you tell them to go burn down parts of the city and people do it, then you're at fault for that. The news, most mainstream, almost all of them, to be honest, mainstream news organizations now are right on that fine line because as soon as they get into their opinions, they're trying to get you to think a certain way, and that can lead you to do certain things. It could be
Mind
to
control.
vote a certain way, or it could be to buy a certain product, or to not buy a certain product, or it could be to like or dislike a certain person, whether it's a candidate or a celebrity or whatever, or a sports person. And it's very borderline because while a lot of people are just going to take that as, oh, you know what? They said this about this person. Obviously, that person's a bad person, so I don't like them. Most people might just be in that area, but you're always going to get those outside fringe people who's like, yeah, they said that this person was a horrible person. I think I should do something about that. And then they go and do something and they try to attack somebody's home or they try to, and the news is responsible for that. But because it's so far removed, you can say, oh, yeah, these are just crazy people on the outside. No
Yeah.
reasonable person would assume that the news was telling me to do that. But it's subtle and it's there. It's
Yeah.
informing your opinion rather than letting you form your own.
If anyone has ever studied psychology, they will most likely be able to see it for exactly what it is.
But even then, that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
Because psychology is what they use. That's what That's what these big media conglomerates use. They want to elicit a feeling. They want
That's
to be like, "Hey,
exactly.
agree with us because we're mad. You should be mad too."
That's why they want to study our social media to see our likes and dislikes and all that good stuff, so they can know exactly what they need to sell to us,
Well,
be it a
they
product or
sell
an idea.
fear. Fear is what they sell.
Yeah, fear
That's all
mongering.
they sell. When's the last time you saw good news that didn't have some fear involved in it, like somebody getting kidnapped and then returned? When's the last time you heard about a puppy getting rescued or a kitten getting rescued or
I love psychology.
some outside of local news? When's the last time you heard about some really good charitable event that happened and the homeless got fed?
Like a
Because
decade ago.
Americans don't want good news. They want drama because
Yeah,
Americans have it too good. Americans want to be oppressed so badly, they'll make up drama just so they can be afraid all the time. It's embarrassing,
reality TV
sure.
shows.
Um, for instance, like speak your truth. There is no your truth. There's no my truth. There's no your truth. There's just the truth.
Yeah,
That's it. That's all it exists. There's no other truths but the truth.
I
You
love it.
know, I think that's where we've fallen as a society by saying things like that, because it gives you an excuse to act a certain way without having to feel remorse for acting in a certain way. You're
Yeah,
like, well, it's this, and that's my truth. No, it's not. That's not even a truth.
I
That's
always
your
like to.
opinion.
Yeah, I always like to tell people that the truth is the truth, whether you believe in it or not. It doesn't change.
Yes, whether it hurts your feelings or not, it's the
Yeah,
truth. You can't get mad at something that is factually evident. But I think once news started having these roundtable discussions and everybody had to have an opinion, social media has given people a voice that shouldn't have a voice. I'm not for going in and cutting their internet off, this, that, and the third, but some people do not need to be on social media.
Twitter
yeah.
is not legitimate social commentary. I say that all the time. Like, Twitter is not actual news. Like, please stop going there for your news. I mean, yeah, check for headlines, sure, because it's happening in the moment, but do not rely on Twitter and
Don't
Reddit
solely
and
base your
all these
information on one
places,
source.
because the majority is not always smart. The majority is not always right, even if they do guide policy and guide how the direction that we go. The more people you have involved in something, generally the worse it gets, to be perfectly honest. That's why you have, for example, I'm gonna mention something that I've noticed. If you have, let's say, a study group of people, just a small study group of people studying biblical stuff, right? You talk amongst yourselves, you trade ideas back and forth, you have good, lively discussion, everything's good. Let's say you have a
Like
mega
what we
church
do.
full of thousands of people. Now you got to have rules because you got to tell people how they're supposed to act at the church, how they're supposed to do things at the church, how they're supposed to do whatever. Then it becomes different because it becomes organized in a way that may not be for everybody's actual benefit, right? Now that's not to say that I'm only using this as an example. I'm not saying churches
Yeah,
in any sort of sense are bad necessarily, right? I'm
metaphorical.
just saying when you get to a certain size, you get to be too bloated for your own good as far as an organization goes, and you can't cater to the people who really need what you're offering, and you go
It
with
got
whatever the
too
group wants to do.
complicated.
And that's unfortunately because we have so many people living in the country, we have so many voters, we have so many this, so many that. A lot of the important stuff just gets boiled down to, oh, this person said he was going to grab somebody by whatever, so obviously that's bad or that's good. This person said he was going to clean up the ocean. Well, we don't care if he's actually going to or not. He said he was going to, so we like him. You take something that could be something important and you boil it down to just a single idea, whether it's attainable or not, and then where are you at?
Lighthouse, I do want to address what you've said. It 100% does fly
Yeah,
somewhat in the face of free speech, but not totally. Because if it's a corporate entity, they're allowed to say, hey, no, you're not allowed to be here on this social media platform. They can terminate you at will, you know. And there's nothing you could do because once you get to the TOS or the terms of service and you sign that terms of service or acknowledge that terms
You
of
agree to
service,
it.
you no longer have any sway in anything. Do I think people should be allowed to have a voice? Yes. Do I think people deserve to have a voice? Some people, no, I do not. But once again, that's me. That's my personal opinion. I don't want to
Yeah.
enforce that. You know what I mean? But then I go on, you go on your different social media platforms and you see how people act. And you're like, why are we letting the riffraff in?
hmm
That's
And
all.
if I could,
But once again,
add
it's
on
not my
to
company.
that,
It's not my business. So they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to have all the riffraff they want. But I'm allowed to have an opinion regarding it. It doesn't mean I'm going to go do anything or go crazy about it. I just won't associate with. Um, but here's the thing, Lighthouse. They're not really providing a public service. Facebook doesn't really provide a public service in the same vein that public broadcasting does. They're just it's it's free. First of all, social media is free. Um, so you don't have to pay a fee, right? No, I don't think they're like no, that's differently regulated than social media is.
regulated by the government.
Telephone networks are, yeah, because they're a full on business. They charge people to use their services. You can't just go plug in a phone and it works. You have to call your local phone provider. You have to connect, and they got to issue the connection. So they're establishing the connection for you to make those calls. So you're basically under their roof, right? Um, with social media, you're not paying for anything unless you do whatever some of the social media things operate. But for the base programs of social media, it's free. Yeah, they can. They've done it. Social media, the corporation themselves can do anything they want for the most part. They could say, "Oh, well, you were antagonizing somebody, which is against our TOS. You're gone." They could make up rules. You know, no, the phone networks, no. But once again, you're paying for that service. You're not paying for social media.
Now,
So
cell phone networks are a little different now, though, because when you sign up for cell phone networks, like for Sprint or AT&T or whoever, they do have terms of service, as opposed to just the landline stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how that would come into play as far as it goes, because I've never heard of
That's a good
somebody
question.
who got kicked off of a cell phone network like they do off social media. So I don't know if it's the same how that goes. Social media a few years ago, I believe it's been more than a few years. I believe it was under Obama, they were trying to push for it to be a utility rather than just what it is. The whole internet. They wanted to make the whole internet a utility. And if that had happened, then the rules would be different. If it was a utility, then it would be regulated more directly by the government, like all utilities are. Even if they're corporations, like the electric company still has to go by government rules, the water company has to go by government rules, all that stuff. And right now, internet, that initiative failed, if I remember correctly. It's not classified as a utility, so it's still in that murky private public area where you can't really regulate it like that, so they're pretty much free to do whatever they want, and if they want to boot you off, they can boot you off. If it was classified as a utility, then there would have to be a structure in place by the federal government, and then in that case things might fall more clearly under free speech patterns.
right.
But so far we're not there. I don't know if that would be a good or a bad thing, honestly, because I don't know if I trust any government to have control over the internet. You see what happens in places
Yeah.
like India, where they can just turn it off if they don't like that your village is upset with the government. They can cut you off from the internet for weeks at a time. Or in the Middle East, they can do the same thing. They can just shut you off. China, they can do the same thing, shut you off. Russia, they can turn off your internet, you know? So
Well, the internet in some ways is a utility. It's not a full
We have to
utility,
pay a
but it
monthly.
is. in terms of like, you have your providers like Spectrum and AT&T and Verizon and things of that nature. So in a way, it still is a utility like a phone company would be,
In all but
right?
name, basically, is where we're at.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
However, it's not under federal regulation.
mhm.
That's where they can get away with those things. It's under federal regulation. And honestly, I don't want to be under federal regulation. The more things that are not under federal regulation, the better, in my personal opinion. Unless there are things that need
The
to be
better.
under federal regulation, most things do not need to be under federal regulation. We don't need them to, because once again, the federal regulations supersede anything. So, like marijuana, for instance, yeah, it's legal in Ohio, and I can go get some right now. However, if the feds come in and say, yeah, it's not legal anymore, they can do this because feds' rights supersede
Yep.
states' rights. So, um, I don't want the federal government regulating social media because then that regulates what I'll see, that regulates what the people I interact with, that regulates the type of ads I'll be shown. I want it to be lawless. I want it to be lawless like the Xbox 360 days were lawless because I think that is the biggest um, form of free
Don't
speech.
want to scan
The
our
people,
face to access a website.
right? Um, I don't. I don't know. I think they can. I think when it comes to things like marijuana, they can 100% do that.
It depends on certain situations. There's a give and take with that. I talked about this on social media some years ago when I was on some of my rants about the virus stuff going on, because people wanted to say, well, the state has to follow this and the federal government can say this and they can't do that. And there's a limit to how far the government can override the states on some things because the states do have rights. But part of that is also based
I
in
like it,
political party.
James.
You have certain political, I don't want to say certain parties, but certain political ideas that give more weight
Ideologies.
to state sovereignty versus federal. And depending on what administration is in charge, you'll see different ways of that working. That's why places like right now, there's that big conversation about the whole sanctuary city and sanctuary state thing going on, because states can say, oh, well, I can do whatever I want because this is the state and this is what my people voted for, and you're the government, the federal government, and what you're doing is wrong, and we're not going to go along with that. The federal government, on the other hand, can be like, all right, fine, you do that, but we're not going to give you any money for it. And they can pull
Oh,
funding and pull different things because there's an interplay between sovereignty and being part of the whole, because the states, as individualized as they are still part of the federal network that is the United States of America. So that gets into a whole other series of discussions that gets
Yeah.
really complicated really, really quickly because it varies by state. It's not even any sort of like Ohio is different from Pennsylvania by leaps and bounds. You wouldn't think so. We're right next to each other. But it's hugely different in regards to how we interact with the federal government.
hey Lee, how you doing, buddy? Welcome. Yeah, that's the thing is like if the government comes in and says, "Hey, we're going to regulate this," there's not really much you can do. For the most part, there's some things where the states can win out, but as long as the federal government has the final say, the federal government has the final say. But that's why social media tends to stay in the private sector because it's easier for them to operate. You don't want to be under government regulations because now they got to hire 3 new people that they really didn't need to hire in the first place to be overwatch of social media management. Um, the government will find some way to tax it so that you'll have to pay for it because that's what the
Yep.
government does best. They tax their citizens to
Taxi.
death. And so, yeah, no, I don't want it regulated. I don't want the government really in anything. People say, well, what about the FDA? I don't want the FDA in anything. To be honest, I mean, if you look at the ingredients for things like in Europe or in Asia, and you look at the ingredients that we have here in the United States, the ingredients are atrocious. You might get a pack of Oreos in England, and it's got all of 4 ingredients. You get a pack of Oreos in the United States, it's got all of 17
25.
ingredients. 15 of those you can't pronounce.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think when it comes to regulation, the government, at this point, I think at the beginning, I get it. You got more people, so you got to kind of regulate the things that need regulated. But as our government got bigger, it became more corrupt. And then once it became more corrupt, it didn't care about the people's rights, it cared about the government's rights. The government only cares about itself because it's a parasite. It needs something to latch onto in order to grow. And it latches onto us and becomes bigger.
And
Lighthouse makes another good point there, real quick. That
Yeah.
and that's why there's been so many discussions over the last 10, 15 years about Texas. California has talked about seceding. There's been other states that I think, like Missouri, for some reason, one of those like off states that you wouldn't think would have anything to do with it, or Oregon or somebody. We're just like, yeah, we could just leave the government. And sure, they could, but then you're also leaving the support of the government, you're leaving the funding of the government, you're leaving a lot of other
whole bunch of
things.
problems.
So it's mostly an empty threat, but at the same time, they would be, if there was a legitimate gripe there, then yeah, they would be well within their rights as a sovereign state to do so. But will the rewards outweigh what could happen without that support network?
Yeah, because they're going to cut power. Because your power is usually in a whole another state. So they can cut your power, they can cut your gas lines, they can cut your water. You're your own sovereign state. Good luck if somebody invades you. We're not going to jump in and do it. And 9 times out of 10, what the government do is just send the military in and take the territory back over. Nobody's going to do nothing. I don't think Russia or China is going to come in and save Missouri from, us going in and taking it. By the time they would get enough fighter jets over here, we'd have already taken it back. So it's, all the secession stuff, they can talk all the secession stuff they want, but in reality, it isn't a viable alternative because there's no state in the United States that could survive on its own. It's there's too many pieces and parts because, okay, let's say you shut down the West, let's say you shut down California, it secedes, right? Okay, so now you have a whole port and the government's just not going to let that port go. They're going to go and they're just going to take the port. There's nothing that can be done. States can secede all they want, but the government just needs a reason to go and invade. Oh, super eminent domain. We're just going to go in there and take it. Secede all you want, but it doesn't solve problems.
And that's why these days you don't have the well-seasoned militia talked about in the Constitution anymore, because those used to be run by the states. Those were the states, because there wasn't a national army at the time. All the states had their own troops. Now, the states don't have troops. You've got the National Guard, which is assigned to different states, but they don't belong to the states. All of the military belongs 100% to the federal government. And I suppose if you have a really good police force, you could make a good showing. Or if some of the military units defect, or if you get the National Guard in your state to agree to switch sides. But that's all a lot of real up in the air stuff. And it makes the whole situation basically untenable as far as things are right now.
And just lets other countries do subversion acts. Yeah, we'll work with you to get rid of that pesky government, but
Thank you, James, for coming to hang out with us. Get some rest, buddy. And if I could get back to what Rob and Lighthouse were talking about a minute ago, if everyone should be allowed to have free speech or not, I would like to say that I believe it's a slippery slope because on the one hand, I believe people should have free speech to an extent, but at the same time, we also have to acknowledge that the more free speech there is, and like Rob said earlier, some people should not be posting things on social media, whether it be for one reason or another, even if it's just because, well, they're silly, to put it politely. Well, here's the deal. The more silly, useless pointless things that people post on the internet. Cat videos, for example. I love cat videos. They're cute. They're adorable. Everyone loves cat videos. But what knowledge do they impart into our brain? What is the point? There is no point. And the more useless information that people put online, like, oh, I had a terrible day, or oh, I had a great day, blah, 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 whatever, who cares? The more pointless and useless information we put online, the more difficult it becomes to see the things that we should be paying attention to and the things that we do need to be looking at.
Well,
And
cat
that is the
videos, to be
problem with free
fair,
speech.
still show the cat in action. So they can be studied to
Yes.
understand how joints work, how a cat's body works, how it's able to
yeah.
flip, to land on its feet, things like
I
that.
hadn't even
That-
thought
that's
about
kind
that.
of educational. That's in an educational
Yeah.
sphere.
But you get what I'm saying, though? Like
I do.
all the random, useless, day-to-day aspects of our lives, for example, the stuff that in general is not really important to the grand scheme of humanity. We should all be focused on learning and educating ourselves and educating others as a hive mind,
Here's the
rather
thing,
than all
though.
the pointless information about our daily lives.
It's not all pointless. Somebody out there uses it for something, i.e., stats for sports, right? I don't watch
Yeah.
a lot of sports, so I can't rattle off how many passes or how many interceptions or how many tackles this many football players had. It's
Yeah.
useless to me, but for scouts and talent agents and things like that, it's very useful.
Oh,
If you're a content
true.
creator, cat, and you're thinking of looking at making cat videos, your best course of action is to watch cat videos and see what lands and see what doesn't land. So I don't think there's, to be honest, there's no such thing as useless information. It's just
All
not
right,
useful to you.
I can
It's
see
useful to
that.
somebody, but it's just not useful to you.
Yeah. But I feel like people, like humanity as a species, is supposed to be a hive mind. And we do a pretty poor job of it.
No,
That is the whole
because
point of
I
the
don't want to
internet,
do that.
is to be a
while
hive
the
mind.
universal consciousness is very much real, a hive mind would be a very poor idea for human beings.
I don't want to do that.
Like, it's just because you're going to know the
We-
other thoughts of other people, and I don't want to know the other thoughts of
Yeah.
other people. I don't.
All right, fair enough.
So
I've always kind of looked at the internet as like our version of a hive mind. It's like our
yes
way
and
to
no.
communicate with each other instantly.
But yeah.
But
All right, you guys.
yeah,
Well,
that's
that's
all
it for this Uncanny Earth. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode of this Uncanny Earth. So please
It'll be
tell your
uncanny.
friends, like and subscribe, and do all that good stuff that you're supposed to do. And we will see you here next Thursday for another episode of this Uncanny Earth. So until next time, why be boring when you can be uncanny? See you folks later.